Darkness, the smell of copper and gunpowder. Sloan Kessler lay in a shallow depression behind a boulder, her left shoulder screaming where the bullet had torn through. Her right hand maintained pressure on the tourniquet wrapped around Gunnery Sergeant David Hayes's thigh. Her left hand still gripped her rifle. 6 Taliban fighters advanced across the rocky terrain. 50 meters. 45. Raven. Prophet's voice was fading, each word costing him. Leave me. Complete the mission. Sloan's response came between controlled trigger pulls. Negative. Shot. A body dropped in the darkness. Drag you out or die trying. Shot. Another fighter fell. Prophet's breathing changed. That wet, rattling sound she'd heard too many times before. The tourniquet wasn't enough. The femoral artery was shredded. Shot. The 3rd Taliban went down. David, stay with me. She never used his first name, only his call sign. But this was different. This was goodbye. His hand found hers on the tourniquet. Squeezed once, then went slack. Sloan Kessler screamed for a medevac helicopter that would arrive 4 minutes too late. Cut to black. The fluorescent lights of Phoebe Sentinel's field hospital hummed their mechanical lullaby through the Afghan night. 0200 hours. That dead space between midnight and dawn, when the human body craves sleep most desperately. When alertness drops to its lowest point. When soldiers on watch have to fight their own biology just to keep their eyes open. Sloan moved between the hospital beds with a quietness that seemed almost supernatural. Navy blue scrubs crisp despite the oppressive heat that lingered even at this hour. Despite the dust that infiltrated everything in this godforsaken corner of Kunar province. Her blonde hair pulled back in a tight bun. At 34, she had the kind of face that suggested competence more than beauty. High cheekbones, eyes that watched everything. A mouth built for reassuring words rather than giving orders. But appearances could be deceiving. She paused at bed 7. Corporal Marcus Webb struggled with his breathing. 23 years old. Shrapnel through his left lung 3 days prior. Each breath was a small victory against the damage that had torn through his chest. Sloan's fingers found his wrist, checking his pulse with practiced efficiency. 58 beats per minute. Steady, strong enough. Her other hand adjusted the pulse oximetry clip on his index finger. The digital readout climbed from 89% to 92%. There you go, she murmured. That particular quality of calm that could steady panicked soldiers and soothe fevered patients with equal effectiveness. Just keep breathing, Corporal. Nice and easy. She turned to adjust his morphine drip. 2 milligrams per hour. Standard protocol for thoracic trauma. And then she caught herself doing it again. That thing she tried so hard not to do anymore. Her eyes had swept the room in a tactical assessment so automatic she barely registered it. 3 exits. Main entrance at 12 o'clock. Supply corridor at 3 o'clock. Emergency egress at 7 o'clock. The main entrance offered no cover for the first 4 meters. The supply corridor had good concealment but poor cover. Canvas walls wouldn't stop rounds. The emergency exit was the best tactical choice if things went sideways. 32 beds total, 14 currently occupied. The patients nearest the exterior walls would be most vulnerable to indirect fire. The ones in the center of the ward had the best chance if mortars started falling. Sloan forced the thoughts away. Focused instead on Corporal Webb's IV line, checking for infiltration at the insertion site. This was who she was now. A nurse, a healer, someone who saved lives instead of taking them. At least that's what she told herself every single day for the past 3 years. Corpsman Kessler. She turned to find Corpsman Eli Brennan standing behind her, clipboard in hand, his young face drawn with exhaustion. 22 years old, fresh out of field medical service school. This was his first deployment. He'd been at FOB Sentinel for exactly 3 weeks, still jumping at the distant thump of artillery fire that echoed from the mountains, still flinching when the base's generators kicked on with their diesel roar. Sloan never flinched, not once, not ever. Eli found that both comforting and slightly unnerving. Vitals are stable on bed 7, she said, making a notation on his clipboard, but watch his oxygen saturation closely. If it drops below 92 again, I want to know immediately. And check his chest tube output every hour. I don't like how much blood we're seeing in the collection chamber. Yes, ma'am. Eli scribbled notes with the desperate intensity of someone who knew he was in over his head. He hesitated. Then, can I ask you something? Sloan glanced at him, waiting. How do you stay so calm, I mean all the time? Even during the mass casualty drill yesterday, you were just steady. Like this is all normal. She considered the question for a moment. How to explain 16 years of experience without revealing what those 16 years actually contained? How to describe the kind of calm that comes from having looked through a rifle scope at another human being and made the conscious decision to end their life that came from having done it 47 times. Experience, Brennan, she said simply. You do this long enough, you learn to control your reactions. The patients need you to be their anchor. If you panic, they panic. So you don't panic. It was a true answer, just not the whole truth. The whole truth was locked in a footlocker, hidden in the supply room. The whole truth had a body count attached to it. Yes, ma'am, Eli said, though he didn't look entirely convinced. Sloan moved on to bed 12. An old farmer named Roy Madsen lay recovering from 70% body burns, 68 years old. Hunting accident 2 days ago that had also killed his daughter. His 10-year-old grandson Tommy was in bed 13, recovering from shrapnel wounds to his chest and arms. She checked Roy's IV, his fluid resuscitation rates, the Silvadene cream coverage on his burns. Professional, efficient, gentle. But inside, a different part of her brain was working. The part she couldn't fully shut down no matter how hard she tried. The hunting accident had been a propane tank explosion. Poor maintenance on an old RV. Preventable if someone had known what to look for. If someone had done a proper safety inspection. Roy would live. Tommy would live. But the boy's mother was in the base morgue waiting for transport home. And no amount of medical skill could change that. Sloan adjusted Tommy's blanket, pulling it higher around his small shoulders. The child stirred in his sleep, murmuring something she couldn't fully understand. For just a moment, less than a heartbeat, something flickered across her face. An emotion too complex to name. Grief for the mother who died. Frustration at her own helplessness despite all her skills. Then the professional mask returned, smooth, impenetrable. At 0630 hours, Master Sergeant Wade Harlow conducted his morning security briefing in the command tent. Sloan had no official reason to be there. Medical personnel rarely attended tactical briefings unless they were coordinating for mass casualty scenarios. But she found herself standing near the entrance anyway, ostensibly checking supply inventories on her tablet. Really listening. Harlow was 48 years old, built like a fire hydrant, compact, solid, immovable. His weathered face bore the scars of multiple deployments. His eyes carried the particular wariness of someone who'd seen too many things go wrong. Perimeter status, he said, pointing at a map spread across the folding table. Western Sector Observation Post Bravo reports all clear. Northern Approach OP. Charlie has visual on the Valley Approach Road out to 8 clicks. Eastern Sector. Sloan's eyes tracked to the map without conscious thought. The eastern perimeter, where a dried wadi ran southeast to northwest, a natural drainage channel carved by seasonal floods. From where she stood, she could see exactly what Harlow was missing. A 35-meter stretch where the wadi's depth and the angle of approach created a blind spot from the nearest observation post. An infantry squad could low-crawl through that dead space and be at the hospital's eastern wall before anyone noticed. She'd identified it in 15 seconds the first day she arrived. Harlow, with his 24 years of experience, apparently hadn't seen it at all. The generator building made it worse. The squat concrete structure sat at an angle that blocked the observation post's line of sight by at least 40 degrees. Attackers using the wadi could use that building for cover, setting up crew-served weapons within effective range of the hospital. Sloan pulled a small notebook from her pocket, the kind nurses use for patient notes, and began sketching. Not medical information this time. A tactical range card, distances marked in meters, dead zones hatched with careful precision. Likely avenues of approach marked with arrows. Wind patterns, elevation changes, everything a trained scout sniper would document. It took her 8 minutes to complete. 8 minutes to document vulnerabilities that should have been identified and addressed weeks ago. She stared at her own handwriting, at the military precise notations that had nothing to do with nursing and everything to do with a life she was supposed to have left behind. Then she made a decision. At 0847 hours, she found Master Sergeant Harlow inspecting fighting positions along the northern perimeter. Master Sergeant, she called, approaching with her notebook. Harlow turned. His expression shifted from focused intensity to polite dismissiveness the moment he recognized her medical insignia. Corpsman Kessler, something I can help you with. Sloan opened her notebook, showing him the range cards she'd drawn. I wanted to talk to you about the eastern perimeter. I've mapped the approach from the wadi. Harlow glanced at the sketch. His eyebrows rose slightly. Then he looked at her with something between amusement and condescension. That's actually a pretty detailed tactical assessment. Where did a nurse learn to draw range cards? I read field manuals, Sloan said evenly, and I've been observing that terrain since I got here. Master Sergeant, this dead zone here? She pointed at her diagram. Combined with the generator building's blind spot, it's a critical vulnerability. Harlow's smile was patient, the kind adults use with children who've said something charmingly naive. He took the notebook, studying her sketch more carefully. I appreciate your concern, Corman, really I do. And this is impressive work for someone without infantry training. He handed the notebook back. But that wadi is monitored. We've got overlapping sectors of fire. Even if someone tried to use it for approach, we'd light them up long before they reach the hospital perimeter. With respect, Master Sergeant, Sloane kept her voice level. Your observation post can't maintain coverage through the entire approach. The angle of the generator building creates... Corman. Harlow's voice took on a firmer edge. I've been doing base security for 24 years. Iraq, Afghanistan, the Philippines, and half a dozen other places you probably never heard of. I know what I'm doing. Sloane felt heat rising in her chest, frustration mixing with something darker. The knowledge that she was right and he was wrong, and that his arrogance might get people killed. I'm not questioning your experience, Master Sergeant. I'm just pointing out a vulnerability that could cost lives, that I've already assessed and deemed acceptable. Harlow's patience was wearing thin. Corman, you focus on keeping our wounded stable. Let me focus on keeping the bad guys outside the wire. That's how this works. He turned back to his inspection. Conversation clearly over. Sloane stood there for a moment, the notebook heavy in her hand. She could push harder, could reveal exactly how she knew what she knew, could tell him that she'd set up ambush positions in Helmand Province and Kandahar, that she'd studied ground from hides for days at a time, that she understood terrain and fields of fire better than most infantry officers. But that would mean tearing down the carefully constructed wall between Sloane Kessler, the nurse, and Captain Sloane Kessler, scout sniper, serial number 0317. She walked away instead, the weight of unspoken knowledge pressing down on her shoulders. At 10:15 hours, she found herself in Colonel Marcus Thorne's path as he moved between buildings. It wasn't entirely coincidental. She'd positioned herself where she knew he'd pass. Time to look accidental. Colonel, sir, may I have a moment? Thorne was 52, iron gray hair cut high and tight, eyes that had seen everything the Marine Corps could throw at them. He'd earned his reputation in Fallujah, leading his company through 3 days of house-to-house fighting without rest. Corman Kessler, what can I do for you? Sir, it's about the eastern perimeter. I've observed what I believe is a significant tactical vulnerability. Thorne held up a hand, his expression carefully neutral. Let me guess, the dried wadi approach, the dead zone created by the terrain, and the generator building. Sloane blinked, surprised. Yes, sir, exactly that. Master Sergeant Harlow called me 10 minutes ago, said you'd approached him with tactical concerns. Thorne's eyes studied her face with uncomfortable intensity. Corman, where exactly did you learn to conduct tactical terrain analysis? The question hung in the air between them. Sloane could feel the moment balanced on a knife's edge. The truth would solve the immediate problem. Thorne would listen to her assessment if he knew her background, but the truth would also destroy the life she'd built, the identity she'd chosen, the distance she'd created from the woman who'd killed 47 people. I've spent 3 years deployed, sir. You pick things up. Do you? It wasn't really a question. Thorne's eyes never left her face. Corman, I appreciate your vigilance, and for what it's worth, I had our intelligence officer run a second assessment of that eastern approach. She agrees there's reduced coverage in that sector. He paused. But Master Sergeant Harlow has 24 years of experience in force protection. If he says the risk is acceptable, I trust his judgment. Sir, with respect. Corman. Thorne's voice carried the weight of command. We can't redesign our entire defensive posture based on a nurse's concerns about infantry tactics, no matter how well researched they might be. Master Sergeant Harlow is the subject matter expert here. A pause. Stand down. It was an order, not a suggestion. Yes, sir. As Thorne walked away, Sloane felt the familiar frustration of being dismissed, of knowing something critically important, and having that knowledge rejected because she wore the wrong uniform, carried the wrong job title. If she'd walked into that meeting as Captain Kessler, scout sniper, he would have listened, would have taken her assessment seriously, would have repositioned forces immediately, but she'd buried that identity under 3 years of nursing. And now she had to live with the consequences. The day crawled forward with agonizing slowness. Sloane threw herself into work, checking and rechecking medical supplies, running inventory on trauma equipment, preparing the hospital for casualties she knew were coming. At 13:47 hours, a Black Hawk helicopter thundered in with an emergency medical evacuation. IED strike on a convoy 20 kilometers south. 3 wounded Marines, all critical. The hospital erupted into controlled chaos. Sloane's hands moved with mechanical precision. Training taking over. Start IV lines. Control bleeding. Assess for tension, pneumothorax. Move. 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 The first Marine had lost his left leg below the knee, the stump wrapped in a hasty tourniquet that had saved his life but left him screaming. Sloane administered morphine, her voice steady and calm even as her hands worked with brutal efficiency. You're going to be okay, Marine. Major Voss is the best trauma surgeon in theater. You're going to make it home. The second Marine had shrapnel wounds across his torso, dozens of small metal fragments that had turned his chest into a minefield. Not immediately life-threatening, but painful and requiring careful extraction. The third Marine wasn't screaming, wasn't moving. His pupils were blown, one larger than the other. Traumatic brain injury. Sloane started an IV anyway, knowing it was probably futile, but unable to stop fighting. Major Garrett Voss came out of the surgical suite at a run, taking one look at the 3 patients and making instant triage decisions. Kessler, take the leg amputation. Get him stabilized for surgery. Brennan, you're on shrapnel wounds. Pick them clean. I'll take the head injury. They worked for 6 hours straight. The leg amputation survived, stabilized and transferred to the surgical suite for revision of the amputation site. The shrapnel victim was clean packed and sent to recovery. The Marine with the head injury died at 1923 hours. Despite everything they tried, he was 19 years old, from somewhere in Alabama, and he would never see his daughter, who was due to be born in 3 months. Sloane stripped off her blood-crusted gloves in the scrub room, her hands shaking for the first time all day. Not from stress, not from exhaustion, but from the familiar weight of failure, of not being able to save someone who desperately needed saving. You did everything right. She turned to find Major Voss standing in the doorway, equally blood-stained and exhausted. He still died, Sloane said quietly. Traumatic brain injury with bilateral blown pupils. He was gone before he got here. We just didn't give up on him. Voss moved closer, his voice dropping. Corpsman, I've been doing combat surgery for 20 years. I've seen hundreds of medical personnel under this kind of pressure. You work for 6 hours without break, without coffee, barely any water. Where did you learn that kind of endurance? Here it was again, the question she couldn't fully answer without revealing truths she wasn't ready to speak. Medical school teaches you a lot about functioning on no sleep, Major. Does it teach you to make battlefield triage decisions like someone with command experience? Does it teach you to maintain tactical awareness even while you're wrist-deep in someone's chest cavity? Voss wasn't being confrontational, just genuinely curious. Because I watched you work today, Corpsman, and I've seen that level of performance exactly twice before in my career. Both times it was combat Marines who'd cross-trained as medics, people who'd learned to function in the absolute worst conditions imaginable. Sloane met his eyes, weighing how much to give him, how much truth she could afford. Everyone handles stress differently, Major. Maybe I'm just good at compartmentalizing. Maybe. Voss didn't look convinced. Or maybe you've seen worse than this. Done worse than this. He paused. Your file says you've been a nurse for 3 years. But earlier you said 16 years deployed. That leaves 13 years unaccounted for, Corpsman. 13 years doing something that taught you to work under pressure like a seasoned combat veteran. The silence stretched between them. Sloane could feel the walls closing in, the carefully constructed barriers beginning to crack. Different life, she said finally. Different person. I'd prefer to leave it in the past, sir. Voss studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Fair enough, but Corpsman, whatever that past was, I'm glad it made you into the nurse you are today. We need people like you here. He left her alone in the scrub room. Sloane slumped against the sink, staring at her reflection in the cracked mirror. Blood on her scrubs, exhaustion in her eyes, and beneath it all, the ghost of the woman she used to be, pressing against the barriers she'd built, waiting for the moment those barriers would finally shatter. That moment came at 05:30 the following morning. Sloane was in the supply room, ostensibly checking inventory. Really, she was standing in front of the medication cabinet, staring at the hidden space behind it where her footlocker waited. She didn't open it. Didn't need to. She knew exactly what was inside. A ghillie suit, custom built for the terrain of Afghanistan's mountainous regions. Strips of burlap and canvas in browns and tans and grays, designed to make a human silhouette disappear into rocks and earth. Range cards meticulously drawn in her own hand. Distances calculated to the meter. Wind patterns mapped by season. Elevation compensations for different valleys. The accumulated knowledge of dozens of operations, hundreds of hours lying motionless in hides, watching, waiting, a scout sniper badge. Number 287, earned through 8 months of the most brutal training the Marine Corps could devise. Earned through pain and deprivation and the absolute refusal to quit even when her body screamed for mercy. And the photograph, 5 Marines in desert marpat camouflage, arms around each other, genuine smiles beneath the weight of war. Sloan recognized the woman she used to be, harder, leaner, with eyes that had seen too much death. Beside her stood Gunnery Sergeant David Hayes, callsign Prophet, her mentor and best friend. Behind them, 3 other Marines whose names she carried like stones in her heart. All 4 men were dead now. Prophet had died in her arms during that mission in November 2021, his blood soaking into the rocks while she screamed for a medevac that couldn't reach them in time. She'd killed the 6 insurgents who'd set the trap, killed them with a rage and precision that scared even her. But it didn't matter. Prophet was gone. The other 3 had followed over the next year. Different operations, different circumstances, same ending. She was the only survivor of that photograph, the only one who'd made it home. Except she hadn't really come home, had she? She'd just changed locations, changed uniforms, changed her job description from eliminate threats to preserve life. But the war followed her. It always would. Sloan closed the cabinet without opening the footlocker. Some doors were better left closed. Some ghosts were better left undisturbed. At bed 13, Tommy Madsen was awake. The 10-year-old boy sat propped against pillows, his small chest wrapped in bandages, shrapnel wounds healing well. But his eyes carried the particular emptiness of someone who'd lost too much too young. Miss Sloan, she sat on the edge of his bed, careful not to disturb his IV line. Can't sleep, buddy. I had a bad dream, about the fire, about Mom. Sloan's hand found his, small and fragile in hers. I know, the dreams are hard. They'll get easier with time. I promise, Bunderwas. Do you have bad dreams? The question caught her off guard. Honesty seemed important here. Yes, I do. About what? About people I couldn't save. About friends I lost. Tommy was quiet for a moment, processing. Then, Miss Sloan, will the bad people come here like on the news, the ones who attack hospitals? Sloan felt something tighten in her chest. The intelligence briefings she'd overheard. The Taliban force staging in Korangal Valley. The eastern perimeter vulnerability that nobody would listen to her about. She looked at this small boy, orphaned, wounded, trusting her completely, and she made a promise she wasn't sure she could keep. Tommy, I will keep you safe no matter what. Okay. Promise, promise, pinky swear. She linked her pinky with his. The boy's grip was surprisingly strong. Okay, I believe you, Miss Sloan. As she tucked him back in and watched his eyes finally close in sleep, Sloan felt the weight of that promise settle over her shoulders. It was 0200 hours, the dead space between midnight and dawn. And somewhere out there in the darkness, she knew with absolute certainty violence was coming. She just didn't know that in less than 24 hours she would have to choose between keeping her promise and remaining the person she'd tried so hard to become, or that the choice would require her to kill 18 people to save 32. The night was quiet, too quiet. Sloan stood at the eastern edge of the hospital compound, staring into the darkness where the dried wadi cut through the terrain like a scar, and waited for the storm. The attack came at 0203 hours on the morning of October 29. Sloan was checking Corporal Webb's vitals when she heard it, a sound most people would have missed or dismissed as distant thunder or aircraft engines. But Sloan had heard that sound too many times to mistake it for anything else. The distinctive whistle of an incoming mortar round. Her body reacted before her conscious mind could process the information. Pure muscle memory from 16 years of combat, from dozens of indirect fire attacks, from training so deeply ingrained it bypassed rational thought entirely. Incoming. She was moving before the word finished leaving her mouth, diving toward Eli Brennan, who stood frozen beside bed 3. Her body slammed into his, driving both of them to the floor behind a steel-frame bed just as the first mortar round impacted 200 meters away. The explosion shook the hospital's plywood frame. Dust rained from the ceiling supports. Emergency lights flickered. Medical equipment rattled on metal shelves. Then came the second round. Closer. Then the third. The base erupted into chaos. Alert sirens screamed. Return fire crackled from defensive positions. The distinct chatter of M240 machine guns mixing with the deeper thump of MK-19 grenade launchers. Sloan's radio clipped to her belt exploded with frantic voices. Contact west perimeter, multiple hostiles in the wire. RPG Southwest Tower. Contact north. Contact north. Dismounted infantry estimate 20 plus. Major Voss stumbled out of the surgical suite, his eyes wide with shock. What's happening? Sloan was already on her feet, her voice carrying a command authority that had nothing to do with nursing. We're under attack. Multiple indirect fire, probably 82mm mortars. Patterns suggest they're adjusting fire toward the hospital. She turned to Eli, who stood paralyzed with fear. Brennan, get everyone away from the exterior walls. Move critical patients to the center of the ward. Now, use mattresses for overhead cover where you can. Corman, how do you? Voss started. Move. Sloane's voice cracked like a rifle shot. Do it now or people die. The force of her command cut through their shock. Voss and Eli began organizing the controlled evacuation of patients from vulnerable positions near the walls, dragging beds toward the center of the ward. Sloane moved to the hospital entrance, pressing herself against the sandbag wall, peering through the gap between canvas and plywood. Outside FOAOB, Sentinel had transformed into a battlefield. Tracers cut through the darkness in brilliant arcs of red and green. Muzzle flashes strobed from fighting positions. Flares hung in the air, turning night into flickering, uncertain day. The main defensive line was holding. She could see Marines in their fighting positions laying down disciplined fire. The insurgents had hit the western and northern perimeters hard, exactly as she would have done. Fix the enemy's attention, make them commit their reserves, then hit the real target from an unexpected direction. Her eyes snapped to the eastern perimeter, toward the dried wadis she'd warned about. Nothing visible yet, but every combat instinct she possessed was screaming danger. Then the radio confirmed her worst fears. Contact east side. Contact east side, multiple hostiles breaching the wire near the hospital. Time seemed to crystallize into perfect clarity. The sound of her own heartbeat became audible, a steady drum rhythm beneath the chaos. Her vision sharpened, peripheral awareness expanding. Adrenaline flooded her system, but instead of panic, it brought a cold, focused intensity she hadn't felt in 3 years. Through the gap in the sandbags, she watched the eastern approach. 4-man security detail rushed from their positions toward the breach, weapons raised. Muzzle flashes erupted in the darkness. The distinctive crack of a K-47 fire. Multiple weapons firing in disciplined bursts. Corporal Danny Frost went down first, his body jerking as rounds tore through his chest. PFC Kyle Drummond tried to return fire, managed 3 shots before bullets found him. He collapsed backward, his rifle clattering on the gravel. Master Sergeant Harlow appeared from the northern defensive position, his M4 barking as he engaged targets in the darkness. Sloane saw the round hit him, saw his body twist, blood spraying from his left shoulder. He stumbled backward but kept firing, training overriding shock and pain. The last defender, Sergeant Owen Grant, was trying to drag Harlow to cover when return fire found him. Center mass. He dropped his weapon, falling from nerveless fingers. Sloane's tactical mind was calculating with brutal efficiency. 12 hostile fighters visible, probably 14 total based on movement patterns. A K-47S. At least 1 PKM machine gun from the sound. 2 RPG launchers. They moved with military precision, bounding by teams, covering each other's movement, maintaining spacing and communication discipline. Not random insurgents, trained fighters, professional. The math was simple and terrible. 4 defenders, 2 of them wounded critically, 1 wounded but still fighting, against 14 attackers who had momentum, surprise, and superior numbers. Harlow was still shooting, but Sloane could see him weakening, see the blood loss taking its toll. He had maybe 90 seconds before shock set in, maybe 2 minutes before he lost consciousness. The insurgents were 60 meters from the hospital entrance, 55 from 50. Behind her, Voss appeared at her shoulder. Jesus Christ, they're coming right for us. Sloane's mind split into 2 tracks. The nurse calculating triage for incoming wounded. The warrior counting enemy fighters. Assessing their weapons, analyzing their tactics, calculating the odds. 45 meters, 40. She turned to Voss, and something in her eyes made him take an involuntary step backward. Get everyone to the surgical suite. Barricade the door with supply cabinets, medical equipment, anything heavy. Put mattresses over the patients for fragmentation protection. Her voice was absolutely steady, carrying a command presence that seemed to come from somewhere deep and dark inside her. Do it now, Major. That's not a request. What are you going to do? But Sloane was already moving, sprinting in a low crouch toward where Sergeant Grant lay motionless near the entrance. She hit the ground in a controlled slide that years of training had made automatic, ignoring the gravel tearing through her scrubs. Her hands found Grant's M4 rifle. Muscle memory taking over. Press check. Round chambered. Magazine check. 23 rounds. Selector switch from safe to semi-automatic. The rifle settled into her hands like greeting an old friend she tried to forget. The weight was familiar. The balance was perfect. Every control was exactly where her fingers expected it to be. Kessler, what the hell? Voss's voice started behind her. Go. The word came out as a roar. Get them to safety. Now. Two Taliban fighters appeared at the hospital entrance, moving fast, weapons raised, already firing toward the beds where patients lay helpless. They were young, early 20s, with the lean, hard look of men who'd spent their entire adult lives at war, moving with the confidence of fighters who expected no real resistance. Sloane's rifle came up with practiced smoothness. No thought, no hesitation, just training that had been drilled into her for 8 months at Scout Sniper School and refined through 16 years of combat. 3 controlled shots in 0.8 seconds. Center mass on the first fighter, center mass on the second fighter. Failure drill to the second fighter's head when he didn't go down after the first hit. Both men dropped like puppets with cut strings. The transformation was complete, instant, absolute. Corpsman Sloane Kessler, gentle night nurse, ceased to exist. In her place stood someone else entirely, a woman who'd earned the call sign Raven. Not for any noble reason, but because her teammates said she was the angel of death watching from above, patient and inevitable. A Marine Scout sniper who'd once held the battalion record for confirmed kills. A woman who'd spent 47 separate moments looking through a rifle scope at another human being and making the conscious decision to end their life. And now in defense of the wounded and helpless in the hospital behind her, she was about to add to that count. Sloane moved to the entrance, using the canvas wall as concealment, her body automatically settling into a tactical stance that was as natural as breathing. Through the gap, she could see the Taliban assault force repositioning, reacting to the sudden resistance. The precision of their movement spoke of professional training, not the typical insurgent tactics she'd seen hundreds of times. Someone had trained these fighters well. One fighter was advancing on Harlow's position, trying to flank the wounded Master Sergeant. Sloane's shot took him in the side of the neck. He went down clutching his throat, blood spraying between his fingers. Holy shit! Harlow gasped from behind his barrier, staring at her with wide eyes. Kessler, are you? Stay down, Master Sergeant! Sloane commanded, already tracking the next threat. That's an order. She moved out from behind cover, sprinting in a low crouch toward Harlow's position. Rounds cracked past her head, so close she felt the pressure waves, but her body was moving with the automatic efficiency of someone who'd trained for exactly this scenario hundreds of times. She reached Harlow, grabbed his armor carrier with her free hand, dragged him backward toward the hospital entrance. He was a solid 200 pounds of muscle and gear, but adrenaline and desperation gave her strength she shouldn't have possessed. You're a goddamn shooter. Harlow wheezed through his pain, his eyes taking in the way she moved, the way she handled her weapon, the tactical precision of every action. Who the hell are you? Later, Sloane cut him off, propping him against sandbags inside the entrance. She took his spare magazines. 4 of them, 30 rounds each, 120 additional rounds. Can you still fight? Harlow looked down at his wounded shoulder, blood soaking through his uniform, but his right arm still worked. He raised his M4 with his good hand. Always, ma'am. Sloane allowed herself the ghost of a smile. Good, because we're about to get busy. An AK-47 opened up from 50 meters out, stitching rounds across the hospital's exterior canvas. Sloane dropped flat, counting muzzle flashes, analyzing the firing pattern. 4 shooters visible, 2 more providing overwatch from elevated positions, probably more in reserve. They were regrouping. They'd realized they were facing more than terrified medical staff. They'd adapted, moving more cautiously now, using proper fire and movement tactics. But they'd made a critical mistake. They'd given her time to prepare. Inside the hospital, she could hear Voss shouting orders, patients crying out in fear, equipment crashing as they built makeshift barricades. Eli Brennan appeared beside her, holding a rifle he barely knew how to use, his face pale but determined. Corpsman Kessler, I can help. Sloane looked at the young medic, 22 years old, still recovering from his own wounds, probably never fired his weapon outside of qualification ranges back home. Brennan, her words died as she saw more insurgents emerging from the darkness. 6 more, no, 7. They'd committed their entire assault force, 20 fighters total, based on her count, and she dropped 3. 17 attackers against her, a wounded Master Sergeant and a terrified 22-year-old who could barely hold his rifle steady. The math was brutal. The odds were impossible, but Sloan had faced impossible odds before, had spent days alone in hostile territory, had talked her way out of ambushes, fought her way through sieges, survived situations that should have killed her. And now, with 32 wounded men depending on her, with doctors and medics and patients who couldn't fight back, she reached down into the deepest part of herself, the part she tried to bury, the wolf. "Brennan," she said quietly, her voice carrying absolute certainty despite the chaos. "You're going to listen to me very carefully. When they come, you're going to aim center mass, short control bursts, 3 to 5 rounds. Don't try to be a hero, just keep them outside these walls. Can you do that?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good man." Sloan checked her rifle one more time. 23 rounds in the magazine. 4 spare magazines, 120 rounds. She'd need to recover weapons from the dead, conserve ammunition, make every shot count. 143 rounds total against 17 fighters who wanted everyone in this hospital dead. She looked at Eli, and something in her eyes made the young medic straighten despite his fear. "I'm going to do what I was trained to do, but you just worry about your sector. Trust your training, breathe." Outside she heard it, a voice calling out in accented English, loud enough to carry over the gunfire. "Raven, I know you're in there." Sloane's blood turned to ice. That voice. She knew that voice. 3 years hiding as a nurse. Did you really think you could run forever? Master Sergeant Harlow looked at her. "Ma'am, you know that guy." Sloane's jaw clenched, her mind racing back 8 years, to a different desert, a different war, a different version of herself. The voice came again. "This is Colonel Nathan Cross. Remember me, Raven? We graduated Scout Sniper School together, class of 2016. You were number 2, I was number 3. Sloane's hands tightened on her rifle. Nathan Cross, she remembered him. Brilliant tactical mind, exceptional marksman, troubled, always pushing boundaries, always questioning orders. The last she'd heard, he'd been discharged, dishonorable. Something about unauthorized operations, civilian casualties. "After they kicked me out, I found better employers," Cross continued, his voice carrying a casual arrogance. "People who appreciate real talent, who don't tie your hands with rules of engagement. I've been training these fighters for 6 months, teaching them to move like Marines, fight like professionals." He paused. "When I heard there was a corpsman at this FOB with unusual tactical knowledge, I had to investigate. Took me 2 weeks to confirm it was you, Sloan Kessler, the great Raven, hiding behind a nurse's uniform." Harlow whispered. "Ma'am, is he telling the truth?" Sloan didn't answer. Her mind was calculating. Cross knew her capabilities, knew her methods. This wasn't a random attack. This was personal. He'd brought 14 trained fighters because he knew what it would take to challenge her. "You have a choice, Raven," Cross called out. "You can die with these people, or you can walk out. Join us. We could use someone with your skills. Real work, real money. No politicians second-guessing every shot." Sloan keyed her radio, changed to the command frequency. "Colonel Thorne, this is Kessler. Be advised, assault force leader is a former Marine. Nathan Cross, scout sniper. He knows our tactics. This is a targeted attack, not random insurgent activity." Thorne's voice came back immediately. "Understood. QRF is engaged on west side, trying to break free to support you. Hold position." Sloan switched back to listening. Cross was still talking. "What's it going to be, Raven? You always were practical. You know the math. 17 trained fighters against you and a couple of wounded defenders. You can't win this." Sloan thought of Prophet, of his last words 3 years ago. "Don't let this define you." But Prophet had been wrong. This did define her. The killing and the healing. The warrior and the nurse. Both parts. Always both. She stood up, exposed in the entrance, rifle lowered, looking toward where she knew Cross was positioned. "Nathan," she called out, "you're right about one thing. I can't win." She paused. "But I don't have to win. I just have to hold long enough for the quick reaction force to get here. And you know what? I think I can do that." Her rifle came up. "Here they come," Harlow said quietly, his voice steady despite the blood loss. Sloan settled into firing position, her breathing slowing, her heart rate dropping. Her mind entering that crystalline state of combat focus where time stretched and every detail became hyper-real. "Let them come." The hospital erupted into hell. Insurgents poured through 3 entry points simultaneously. A coordinated assault, exactly as Cross would plan it. Sloan moved through the chaos like smoke, each shot deliberate, each movement calculated. A fighter rounded the corner. Her double tap dropped him before he could acquire a target. 4 down, movement left. She pivoted. 3 rounds into a fighter trying to flank through the supply corridor. 5 down, an insurgent came at her with a knife. Close quarters. No time for the rifle. Sloan dropped the M4, her hands moving through Marine Corps martial arts training. She redirected his thrust, used his momentum, drove her elbow into his face. Breaking bone. Her combat knife taken from Grant's belt found his kidney. He dropped. 6 down. Eli was firing from his position. Wild shots, but the suppression helped, keeping fighters from rushing. Brennan controlled fire. Make them count. The young medic adjusted. His next burst more disciplined. Sloan recovered her rifle, moved to new position. A fighter exposed himself, trying to locate her. Her shot caught him center mass. 7 down. Behind you, Eli screamed. Sloan spun, an insurgent climbing through torn canvas. Mid-climb, vulnerable. Her shot hit him. He hung there, suspended by the fabric. Then slid down, leaving a red smear. 8 down. The firefight had been raging for maybe 6 minutes, an eternity in combat time. Her scrubs were soaked with sweat and blood, some hers from minor cuts, most from other people. Around her, the hospital was destroyed, equipment shattered, walls torn, beds overturned, shell casings littered the floor. But the patients in the surgical suite were still alive. She counted bodies. 8 insurgents down inside the hospital, maybe 2 more outside from Harlow's shooting. That left approximately 7 or 8 still in the fight, and her ammunition was running critical. She grabbed an AK-47 from a dead fighter, checked the magazine, about 30 rounds. Kessler, Harlow called from his position. They're pulling back, regrouping. Sloan moved to the entrance, used the sandbag wall for cover. Risked a look outside. Harlow was right. The remaining insurgents had pulled back to about 75 meters, taking cover behind the generator building, planning something. Then she heard Cross's voice again, closer this time. Not bad, Raven. You still got it. But you know how this ends. My fighters will rush you from 3 sides. You can't stop them all. He paused. Unless you want to make this interesting. You and me, Webang. 1 shot, long range, like the old days. You win, my team pulls back. I win, you surrender. It was a lie. Sloan knew it was a lie. Cross wouldn't honor any agreement. But he was giving her information. He was positioning for a long-range shot, which meant he was setting up at distance, which meant he wasn't with the assault force, which gave her an idea. Harlow, she whispered, you still have that grenade? The master sergeant checked his vest with his good hand, producing an M67 fragmentation grenade. 1. What are you thinking, ma'am? The generator building? Same plan as before. But this time I'm going after Cross while they're distracted. That's suicide, ma'am. He'll have a hide set up. Good position. I know, but he's expecting me to defend, not to attack. Sloan looked at Eli. Brennan, when that grenade goes off, you keep firing at anyone who moves. Don't let them reorganize. Can you do that? Yes, ma'am. Harlow, you call it when you're ready. The master sergeant pulled the pin. Frag out. The grenade arced through the darkness, hit the ground near the generator building, detonated. The explosion punctured fuel drums. Diesel sprayed. The secondary explosion was massive. A rolling fireball climbed into the night, turning darkness today. Insurgents caught in the blast, burning, screaming. Sloan was already moving. Not toward the fire, the opposite direction, sprinting low across open ground, using the chaos as cover. Cross would be positioned somewhere with good line of sight to the hospital. Elevated if possible, probably 200 to 300 meters out. She scanned the terrain as she ran. There, a small rise, natural position, good fields of fire. Sloan dropped into a wadi, using the terrain for concealment, moved fast but quiet. She could hear gunfire behind her. Eli keeping up suppression, the base finally coming alive with support. But she had one objective now. Nathan Cross had come here specifically to kill her, to prove himself better, to show that she couldn't hide. She was going to end that. Sloan low-crawled the last 50 meters, using every bit of cover, moving when the gunfire was loudest, freezing when it wasn't. She crested the rise from the reverse slope, and there he was, Nathan Cross, prone behind a Barrett M82.50 caliber rifle. Scope trained on the hospital. Radio beside him, completely focused downrange. He never heard her coming. Sloan's rifle pressed against the back of his head. Nathan, he froze. Raven, impressive. I really didn't think you'd come for me. You targeted this hospital because you knew I was here. You brought fighters to kill wounded soldiers. That's not being a warrior. That's being a terrorist. Strong words from someone who killed 47 people. To protect others, you're killing for money. Cross laughed, bitter. We're not so different, Raven. We're both killers who got good at it. We're completely different. I stopped. You didn't. She keyed her radio. Thorne, I have Cross, requesting security detail to my position. Cross spoke quietly. You won't kill me. That's not who you are anymore. Right, the gentle nurse. Sloane's finger was on the trigger. All the justification in the world. He'd orchestrated this attack. People were dead because of him. One squeeze and it would be over. But she thought of Tommy's question earlier. Will the bad people come? And her promise, I'll keep you safe. She'd kept that promise. Not by killing everyone, but by stopping them. Cross was stopped. The attack was over. You're right, she said finally. I won't kill you. Not because I can't, because I don't have to. She pulled zip ties from her pocket, secured his hands behind his back. Marines arrived 3 minutes later, took Cross into custody. As they dragged him away, he looked back at her. You'll kill again, Raven. It's who you are. Maybe, Sloane said quietly, but only when I have to. Not because I want to. She walked back toward the hospital, the eastern sky beginning to lighten with pre-dawn gray. The sound of American firepower filled the night. The quick reaction force had broken through, their M4s and machine guns tearing into what remained of the insurgent assault force. The remaining fighters broke and ran, dragging wounded with them, fading back into the darkness. By the time Sloane returned to the hospital entrance, it was over. Hospital secure. Marines were shouting, clear, clear building, secure. Major Voss emerged from the barricade, stepping carefully over bodies, his eyes finding Sloane covered in blood and cordite. Corpsman Kessler, he said quietly. Who are you really? Sloane looked at him, then at the bodies, then at her own hands. Just Sloane Major, just someone who did what was necessary. Before he could respond, Colonel Thorne's voice crackled over her radio. Kessler, status report, now. Sloane keyed her mic. Sir, hospital secure. Multiple enemy KIA Cross in custody. Our casualties are Master Sergeant Harlow with GSW to shoulder. 2 security personnel KIA. All patients stable. A pause. Corpsman, how many enemy did you personally engage? Sloane counted silently. The bodies inside. The ones outside. Approximately 15, sir. Hard to get exact count with QRF engagement. Another pause. Longer this time. 15. You engaged 15 hostiles as a nurse. Yes, sir. Remain in position. I'm coming to you. Sloane secured her weapon and moved to Harlow, her training as a nurse reasserting itself. Checked his wound, applied fresh pressure dressing. Started a second IV line. Ma'am, Harlow said weakly, you went after Cross alone. That was the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever seen. Probably both, Master Sergeant. Eli approached, shaking but unhurt. Ma'am, I didn't think we'd make it, but you were incredible. Sloane put a hand on his shoulder. You held your position, Brennan. That's all anyone can ask. You did good. Colonel Thorne arrived with his command staff. They stood in the entrance of the destroyed hospital, taking in the carnage. Thorne's eyes found Sloane, still kneeling beside Harlow, hands working even as her scrubs dripped blood. Corpsman Kessler, we need to talk now. Sloane stood slowly, meeting her commanding officer's eyes. Sir, I did what was necessary to protect the patients under my care. Necessary? Thorne repeated the word. Master Sergeant Harlow's report was quite detailed. He described tactical movement consistent with advanced infantry training. Weapon handling suggesting extensive combat experience. Shot placement he characterized as artist-level marksmanship. He turned to his intelligence officer. Pull Corpsman Kessler's complete military record. Original jacket. The officer's fingers flew over her tablet. Her eyes widened, then widened further. Sir, oh my God. Read it aloud, Captain. The officer's voice shook. Kessler Sloane Avery, Captain United States Marine Corps, MOS 0317, Scout Sniper. The Marines nearby went still. She continued. Scout Sniper School Honor Graduate, Advanced Skills Distinguished Graduate, confirmed kills 47. Someone whistled softly. Decorations, Silver Star with Valor Device. 2 Bronze Stars with Combat Distinguishing Device. 3 Purple Hearts. Navy Marine Corps Commendation Medal. Combat Action Ribbon. The officer looked up. Sir, there is a classified section requiring higher clearance. Later. Thorne's eyes never left Sloan. Captain Kessler, why didn't you tell us what you were? Sloan's jaw clenched. Because I didn't want to be that person anymore, sir. I wanted to save people, not kill them. I thought I could leave it behind. Her voice carried pain beneath the steadiness. You saved 32 lives tonight, Captain. I killed 15 people. The math doesn't balance, Colonel. It never does. Thorne stepped closer. Those 15 were trying to murder wounded soldiers. That's not murder, Captain. That's war. And whether you want to admit it or not, you're damn good at it. Before Sloan could respond, the intelligence officer's tablet chimed. Sir, new SIGINT. The attack tonight wasn't the main assault. It was a probe. She looked up face pale. The real assault force, 40-plus fighters with mortars and recoilless rifles, is staging in Korangal Valley, 800 meters northeast. They're coordinating a dawn bombardment in 45 minutes. She paused. Our counter-battery radar was damaged. We're blind. They have a forward observer on Hill 384, 687 meters from our position. He's directing the mortar crews. The implication was clear. Without counter-battery, the next attack would be devastating. Everyone turned to look at Sloan. Thorne's voice was quiet but carried command weight. Captain Kessler, we have no designated marksman. Sergeant Kowalski is in surgery. You're the only qualified sniper on this FOB. He opened a rifle case. Inside M40 A5 sniper rifle, Night Force scope, Harris bipod. Can you make a 700-meter shot at dawn with thermal inversions against a dug-in forward observer? Sloan stared at the rifle. She hadn't touched one in 3 years. Sir, my longest confirmed shot was 1,247 meters, but that was a different life. Captain, that life is the only thing standing between us and a massacre. I'm not ordering you. I'm asking. Will you take the shot? Sloan thought about Prophet dying in her arms. The 47 people she'd already killed. The weight she carried. Then she thought about the patients, about Corporal Webb, about Tommy Madsen, about Eli, about all the people who couldn't protect themselves. Running from who she was didn't make her better. It just made her unable to protect those who needed her. Her hands reached for the rifle case. I'll need a spotter, sir. Harlow, being treated nearby, spoke up. I'll do it, ma'am. Be an honor. Sloan nodded. 23 minutes to dawn. Let's move. She picked up the rifle. And for the first time in 3 years, Captain Sloan Raven Kessler allowed herself to be exactly who she was. 23 minutes later, Sloan lay prone on the eastern observation post, the M40A5 resting on sandbags, her eye pressed to the scope. Beside her, Master Sergeant Harlow scanned through binoculars, his wounded shoulder braced against padding. The pre-dawn darkness was beginning to fade. That strange gray time when night gives way to day, but neither fully dominates. Sloan performed the ritual she'd thought she'd abandoned 3 years ago. Her hands moved across the rifle with the certainty of muscle memory, checking the bolt, confirming the ammunition. 5 rounds of 168-grain Federal Gold metal match loaded in the internal magazine, 15 more in reserve. She pulled her notebook, the same one where she'd drawn the range card that Harlow had dismissed days ago, and began recording data. Target distance, 687 meters, confirmed by laser rangefinder. Elevation angle, 8 degrees upward. Wind left to right, 9 knots gusting to 11. Temperature, 52 degrees Fahrenheit and dropping. Humidity, 68%. Barometric pressure, 29.87 inches of mercury. All variables that would affect the bullet's trajectory over 687 meters of Afghan morning air. Harlow watched her work in professional silence. Then, ma'am, you're calculating Coriolis effect for under 700 meters. Sloan didn't look up from her calculations. At this latitude, it's 0.3 MOA. Negligible, but I account for everything. She finished her notes, set the notebook aside, then reached into her pocket and pulled out the photograph. 5 Marines in Desert Marpat. Prophet Hayes beside her, arm around her shoulders, genuine smile beneath the weight of war. She touched the photo to her lips. This one's for you, brother. You taught me to protect people. Medical school taught me to heal them. Maybe I can do both. Maybe I always could. She returned the photo to her pocket and settled into position behind the rifle. The pre-dawn cold seeped through her blood-stained scrubs. Her body ached from the firefight. Minor cuts burned, bruises throbbed. Exhaustion pressed down on her shoulders like a physical weight, but none of it mattered. She began the breathing exercise that Prophet had taught her 16 years ago. Inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 7 seconds, exhale for 8 seconds. Her heart rate dropped, 72 beats per minute, then 65. then 58. Her hands steadied. Her mind entered that crystalline state of focus where the world narrowed to the space between heartbeats. Dawn broke at 0647 hours. Through the scope, the Taliban position materialized from the darkness. Sloan could see fighters moving, setting up 82mm mortar tubes, a coordinated team working with military precision, and they're partially concealed behind a generator housing the forward observer. Adult male, dark clothing, radio in one hand, binoculars in the other, directing the mortar crews with hand signals. Target acquired, Harlow said quietly. Adult male 687 meters partial concealment, boys behind generator housing. Wind steady 9 knots left to right. Sloane's crosshairs settled on the target's center mass. Her mind ran through the calculations one final time. Distance 687 meters. Wind 9 knots equals 1.2 MOA right hold. Elevation 8-degree angle equals 0.5 MOA up. Temperature, cold air, denser, less bullet drop. Coriolis 0.3 MOA at this latitude. All variables accounted for. She settled the crosshairs. Her breathing entered the natural respiratory pause. That moment between exhale and inhale when the body is perfectly still. Between heartbeats, her finger found the trigger. Smooth pressure. Not a pull. A squeeze. The rifle kicked into her shoulder with familiar authority. Through the scope, she watched the round travel across 687 meters of Afghan morning. And miss. The bullet impacted 3 inches left of the target, striking the generator housing, sparking off metal. The forward observer dove to cover. Sloane's breath caught in her throat. Fuck, I'm out of practice. 3 years since her last shot. 3 years of letting the skills degrade. The muscle memory fade. 47 confirmed kills meant nothing if she couldn't make the shot when it mattered most. Harlow's voice cut through her rising panic. Calm, professional. Adjust windage half MOA right. Breathing's good. Position's good. You just need to trust it again, ma'am. Sloane worked the bolt. The spent casing ejected with a metallic clink. A fresh round chambered with mechanical precision. She forced herself to breathe, to reset. 47 previous kills flashed through her memory. Every face, every choice, every weight carried. But this time was different. This wasn't eliminating a threat for elimination's sake. This was protecting. Actively choosing to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. Prophet's voice in her memory. Precision isn't about killing Raven. It's about purpose. Through the scope, the target re-emerged, thinking the shooter had missed completely, returning to direct his mortar crews. Fatal mistake. Sloane's breathing reset. Inhale. Hold. Exhale. Natural pause. Her crosshairs tracked the target. Adjusted half MOA. Right. Accounting for her previous miss. The world narrowed to this moment. This choice. This shot. Her finger found the trigger. Squeezed. The rifle spoke. Through the scope, she watched the target jerk backward. Moan. The 7.62mm round punching through his chest. Center mass. Exactly where she'd aimed. He dropped behind the generator housing. Hit confirmed, Harlow said quietly. Target down. Beautiful shot, ma'am. But Sloane wasn't done. The Taliban position erupted in chaos. Fighters scrambling, leaderless. She worked the bolt. Acquired the next target. A fighter trying to man the mortar. Her shot destroyed the mortar's sight mechanism. The weapon useless now. Bolt. Chamber. Acquire. A fighter shouldering an RPG, aiming toward the base. Her round took him center mass. He fell backward. The RPG clattering unfired. Bolt. Chamber. Acquire. A commander trying to rally the troops, shouting orders. Her shot silenced him permanently. Bolt. Chamber. Acquire. The remaining fighters broke, running, abandoning their equipment, fleeing into the hills. One last shot. Long range. A fighter at the edge of effective distance. She led him slightly, compensating for his movement. Squeezed, hit. 6 shots fired. 5 hits, 1 miss. The secondary assault broken before it could begin. Sloane lowered the rifle slowly, her hands beginning to shake as the focus state dissolved. Not from fear, not from adrenaline fade, from the weight of what she'd just done. Harlow was speaking into his radio, reporting the engagement, confirming target neutralization. But Sloane was staring at her hands, at the instrument that had defined so much of her life, the rifle she'd thought she could leave behind, bury with her old identity. But tonight had proven the truth. You couldn't bury part of yourself. You could only accept it, integrate it, learn to live with both the light and shadow inside your soul. Behind them, the quick reaction force mobilized to pursue the fleeing insurgents. The immediate threat was over. The hospital was safe. 32 lives were protected by 9 precision shots from a woman who tried to stop being a killer and learned she could be both killer and healer simultaneously. "Ma'am," Harlow said gently, "you okay?" Sloan thought about the question. Was she okay? She'd killed 18 men in one night, 15 in close combat, 3 from distance. She'd saved 32 lives, 40-plus medical staff, 120-plus security personnel who would have been caught in the bombardment. She'd confronted the identity she'd tried to escape and discovered it was inseparable from who she'd become. "I don't know, Master Sergeant," she admitted, "but I will be." She secured the rifle and stood, looking back at the hospital where Voss was still working, where Eli was recovering, where patients slept peacefully protected by violence they'd never fully understand. The sun was rising now, painting the Afghan sky in shades of pink and gold. A new day, a new understanding. Sloan Kessler, Marine Scout sniper and Navy corpsman, warrior and healer, both, always both. She picked up the rifle case and walked back toward the hospital, carrying both her identities with her, no longer trying to choose between them, but learning finally to embrace them both. And for the first time in 3 years, something close to peace settled in her chest. The bodies had been removed by the time Sloan returned to the hospital, blood mopped from floors, damaged equipment cleared. The worst of the destruction hidden behind the efficiency of a military base returning to operational status. But the memory remained, would always remain. 18 human beings who'd woken up yesterday morning, now dead by her hand. Major Voss met her at the entrance, his surgical scrubs still stained from the night's work. "All patients stable. Harlow's in surgery now, shoulder repair. He'll make full recovery." He paused. "Thanks to you getting him to cover when you did." Sloan nodded, unable to find words. "Captain Kessler," Voss used her rank deliberately, "what you did tonight. I've been in combat medicine for 20 years. I've never seen anything like it. I killed 18 people, Major. You saved over 200. His voice was firm. "Those 18 were trying to murder wounded soldiers and medical staff. You stopped them. That's not something to be ashamed of." Before Sloan could respond, a small voice called out, "Miss Sloan?" Tommy Madsen came running from the surgical suite where he'd been sheltered during the attack. The 10-year-old boy wrapped his arms around her waist. "You kept your promise. You pinky sweared, and you kept it." Sloan knelt to his level, and for the first time in 3 years, tears came. Not from joy, not from relief, from the weight of 18 deaths required to keep that promise to a child. "Yeah, buddy, I kept it." Tommy pulled back, seeing the tears on her face. "Why are you crying? We're safe now." How to explain to a 10-year-old that safety sometimes requires terrible choices, that protection demands a price. Sometimes grown-ups cry when they're happy. "Tommy, I'm glad you're safe." It wasn't the whole truth, but it was true enough. Eli Brennan approached, his young face still pale from the night's events, but eyes clear. "Ma'am, Captain Kessler, you saved everyone. How do you feel?" Sloan stood, looked at the young medic who'd stood his ground despite his terror. Like a murderer and a hero, Brennan. Both. Always both. She paused, needing him to understand this. "Those 18 people are dead because of me. That's true. 190 people are alive because of me. Also true. Neither cancels the other. You carry both forever." Eli nodded slowly, beginning to understand the cost of violence in service of protection. At 1100 hours, Colonel Thorne found her in the supply room. She was standing in front of the medication cabinet, not looking at the hidden footlocker behind it, just standing. "Captain Kessler, walk with me." His tone was formal but not cold. They walked to his office in silence. Inside, he closed the door. "I'm not here to reprimand you. I'm here to offer you something." He opened a folder on his desk. "We're establishing a new training program. Integrated Combat Medicine Protocol. Teaching our corpsmen and medics tactical defensive operations. Not making them infantry, but ensuring they can protect themselves and their patients when necessary." He slid the folder across to her. "The program needs a director, someone who understands both worlds, someone who's lived in both worlds." Sloan looked at the proposal, read the mission statement, the training objectives. The goal of creating medical personnel who could function as both healers and last-line defenders. "Sir, if I do this, the motto must be specific. First to heal, last to harm, always to protect." She met his eyes. "Healing is the primary mission. Always. Violence is the absolute last resort. But when protecting the innocent requires force, I'll write it into the charter." Thorne interrupted. Healing first, force last, protection always. Those are good words to build a program on. He paused. Will you lead it? Sloan looked at the folder, then at the window overlooking the eastern perimeter where she'd made those shots. Then at the hospital where Tommy was probably coloring in his bed. Yes, sir. Thorne extended his hand. They shook. There's one more thing. Several people want to speak with you. Master Sergeant Harlow was first. His arm in a sling, shoulder heavily bandaged, but eyes clear. Ma'am, Captain, I owe you an apology. His voice was formal. Sincere. You tried to warn me about that Eastern approach, showed me your tactical assessment. I dismissed you because you were a corpsman, not infantry. I was wrong. People died because I didn't listen. He came to attention despite his wounds. I'm sorry, Captain. Sloan felt something loosen in her chest. Master Sergeant, we all have gaps in our knowledge. You listened when it mattered. You volunteered as my spotter despite being wounded. That's what counts. She offered her hand. Harlow shook it, respect clear in his eyes. Sergeant Callum Briggs came next, the medic who challenged her calls, who'd resented her interventions. Ma'am, Captain Kessler. He struggled with the words. I was a dick to you, questioned your medical judgment, made jokes about the new corpsman. He met her eyes. You saved my life twice last night. Once when I missed that arterial bleed. Once when you kept those fighters from breaching our position. I was wrong about you. Won't happen again. Sloan nodded. We all have room to grow, Sergeant. You're a good medic. You'll be a better one now. Major Voss was last. I knew from day one you were different, he said quietly. The way you moved, the decisions you made, the calm under pressure. He smiled slightly. I'm glad you're on our side, Captain. Gladder still you're going to teach the next generation. They need what you know, both parts of it. That evening, alone in her quarters, Sloan finally opened the footlocker. The ghillie suit, the range cards, the scout's sniper badge, and the photograph. She traced Prophet's face with one finger. I stopped running, brother. From who I was, what I did. You taught me to be a warrior. Medical school taught me to be a healer. Took me 3 years to figure out I'm both. She placed the photo on her desk. Beside it, she set her nursing credentials. Both visible, both honored, both her. Months later, Pierce 2025 FOB. Sentinel looked different in spring. The hospital had been rebuilt, stronger than before, with proper defensive positions integrated into its design. The Eastern Wadi approach that Sloan had warned about was now covered by overlapping fields of fire and a secondary observation post exactly where she'd recommended. Sloan stood in front of 12 students on the training ground, the first graduating class of the Hayes Protocol Integrated Combat Medicine. 16 students total, 11 Navy corpsmen ranging from 22 to 34 years old, 3 Army medics between 24 and 29, 2 civilian trauma nurses cross-training for veterans hospitals both in their late 20s, mix of genders, mix of backgrounds, volunteers. Sloan looked different too. She'd gained back 14 pounds she'd lost from stress. The dark circles under her eyes had faded. She slept 6 to 7 hours a night, now up from 3. The tension in her shoulders had released. Her face was softer, not the hard-edged woman from October. The difference between hospital medicine and field medicine, she said, her voice carrying across the training area, is this: in a hospital, security handles threats. In the field, sometimes you are the security. She paused, making sure they understood. You might have to neutralize a threat before you can treat a patient. You might have to kill someone to save someone else. Her eyes swept the class. That will haunt you. It should haunt you. The day taking a human life stops bothering you is the day you've lost your humanity. Remember that. A young female corpsman in the front row raised her hand. Petty Officer Tessa Whitmore, 24 years old, 3 months in country. Ma'am, how do you live with the kills? I mean, how do you sleep at night? Sloan appreciated the honesty of the question. You don't live with them, Petty Officer. You carry them. Every face, every decision, every trigger pull. She sat on the edge of the table, making this personal. I carry 65 faces now, some from 10 years ago, some from 6 months ago. I see them when I close my eyes. The class was silent, listening. But I also carry the other faces, the 190-plus people alive, because I was willing to do what was necessary. 32 patients in that hospital. Tommy Madsen, 10 years old, who'd be dead if I'd chosen to stay just a nurse. She paused. Both sides exist. Both are true. You don't balance one against the other. You carry both. Another pause. But here's what matters. When you carry that weight, you use it to inform better decisions next time. You become wiser, more careful, more deliberate about when violence is truly necessary. After class, Sloan returned to her office. On the wall, two photographs hung side by side. The first, her original team with Prophet Hayes, Afghanistan 2018. 5 Marines, young and hard and purposeful. The second, Hayes Protocol Class 001. 16 students in mixed uniforms standing at attention, Sloan-centered. Beneath both photos, a handwritten caption, "They taught me to fight. I teach them to heal. Both matter." Her desk held a briefing folder. Deployment orders for an Iraq advisory mission. Report date June 15th. Her new designation, Tactical Medicine Advisor. Dual role authorization, medical operations, plus force protection, consultation. The Marine Corps had finally created a position that acknowledged both parts of who she was. On her laptop, a video call connected. Her mother's face appeared. Marion Kessler, 62, calling from Virginia. "Sweetheart, you look good, really good. Something's changed." Sloan smiled, a real smile. "I stopped running, Mom, from who I was, what I did." She gestured at the photos on her wall. "Prophet taught me to be a warrior. Medical school taught me to be a healer. For 3 years, I thought I had to choose. Turns out, I'm both, always was." Her mother's eyes glistened. "David would be so proud of you, honey. Both parts, the fighting and the healing. He taught you both for a reason." "I know that now," Sloan said quietly. "Took me 3 years and one hell of a night to figure it out. But I'm at peace with it, finally." After the call, she pulled out her notebook. The same one where she'd drawn that first range card, where she'd documented her sniper shot calculations. On a fresh page, she wrote the statistics that had been compiled over the past 6 months. Hayes Protocol Training Summary. 127 medical personnel trained to date. A medical system had requested curriculum implementation across 8 states. 12 via hospitals running pilot programs, focusing on rural and remote facilities where law enforcement response times exceeded 15 minutes. Navy Medicine integrating Hayes Protocol into Fleet Marine, Force Corpsman training pipeline. New 40-hour module tactical patient defense. 0 casualties among Hayes Protocol graduates deployed to high-threat areas. 14 documented incidents where trained medics successfully defended patients under fire. The quote was spreading through military medicine communities, appearing on unit patches, training materials, morale shirts. Heal when you can, fight when you must, always protect. Simple words, but they carried the weight of everything she'd learned. That evening, packing for her upcoming deployment, Sloan laid 2 items side by side on her bunk. The M40A5 rifle in its case, her medical ruck with Corpsman insignia, both tools, both necessary, both hers. She thought about Prophet's last words. "Don't let this define you, Raven." But he'd been wrong. All of it did define her. The 65 lives she'd taken, the hundreds she'd saved, the warrior and the healer, the killer and the protector. She wasn't running from either anymore. Not hiding who she was, not pretending to be only who she wanted to be. She was both. Always had been, always would be. And maybe that was exactly what the world needed. The next morning before the sun rose, Sloan returned to the Eastern Observation Post one last time. The place where she'd made those dawn shots 6 months ago. The wadi below was quiet now, empty. The generator building had been rebuilt. The fuel drums relocated to a safer storage area. All the vulnerabilities she'd identified had been addressed. She stood there as the sun climbed over the mountains, painting the Afghan sky in shades of copper and gold, thinking about the journey. From Captain Sloan Kessler Scout Sniper to Corpsman Sloan Kessler Nurse to finally just Sloan. Integrated. Whole. Tommy Madsen had been transferred stateside 2 weeks ago, fully recovered, reunited with his grandfather Roy. Before leaving, he'd given her a drawing. Stick figures of a nurse holding a rifle protecting a hospital bed with a small boy in it. Caption in crayon, "Miss Sloan kept her promise." That drawing was tucked in her footlocker now, beside Prophet's photo. Beside her Scout Sniper badge, all the pieces of who she was. As the sun fully cleared the mountains, Sloan picked up her rifle case. Time to head to the armory. Return the M40A5 until the next time it was needed, and there would be a next time. She understood that now. But between those times, she would heal, would teach, would save lives. And when the moment came that required the other half of her training, she would be ready. Not because she wanted to kill, but because she was willing to protect. First to heal, last to harm, always to protect. The words had become more than a motto. They'd become a philosophy, a way of life, a truth she'd carved from violence and compassion both. Sloane Kessler walked back toward the base, toward her students waiting for morning formation, toward the deployment that would take her to Iraq in 6 weeks, toward whatever came next, carrying all of who she was, every light and shadow, every kill and every save, every nightmare and every moment of grace, complete, integrated, finally at peace with the woman she'd always been and the woman she'd tried to become, understanding at last that they were the same person. In her pocket, her phone buzzed. A text from Petty Officer Whitmore. "Ma'am, question about yesterday's tactical medicine scenario. Can we talk before class?" Sloane smiled. The next generation, learning what she'd learned, carrying forward what Prophet had taught her, what the Marine Corps had trained her, what medicine had given her. The legacy wasn't the shots she'd made, the lives she'd taken. It was the wisdom she could pass on, the integration she could teach, the understanding that protecting sometimes requires violence, but violence in service of protection is fundamentally different than violence for its own sake. She typed back, "Meet me at the training ground, 0600, bring coffee." The work continued, the teaching, the healing, the protecting, and when necessary, the fighting. Both hands, both skills, both parts of herself. Sloane Kessler, warrior and healer, walked into the Afghan sunrise, ready for whatever came next, whole at last.